Hello, I'm Chris DeVito with Iran 180. In our introductory podcast, we talked about how the Iranian regime has deliberately undermined the stability of its neighbors in Iraq and Afghanistan. In this edition of the Iran Interference Podcast, we're going to tell you about Iran's negative influence abroad, this time in places you might not expect. Today, we will be speaking about Latin America. In recent years, Iran has also cultivated ties with a series of populist, anti-American political leaders throughout the continent. The most important ally of Iran in this regard has been the autocratic president of Venezuela, Hugo Chavez. Aided by the personal friendship between Hugo Chavez and the Iranian president Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, the Iranian regime has sought to grow ties with officials throughout the region who share Chavez's authoritarian tendencies and populist and anti-American vision. These leaders include Evo Morales in Bolivia, Rafael Correa in Ecuador, and Daniel Ortega in Nicaragua. Iran's relationship with these countries has been strengthened by the extension of various trade and aid packages from Tehran. Such packages have been extended to Nicaragua, Bolivia, and Ecuador. The promises of aid and investment are indicative of a diplomatic push to break Iran's international isolation and garner support for the Iranian regime's goals in international bodies like the United Nations. These developments are of logical concern to American policymakers and citizens and should be treated as a serious challenge to American policy in the region. In recent years, Iran has sought to establish means by which illicit travel to and from the region can be facilitated. These efforts have been enabled by Venezuela and Iran's establishment of a direct flight from Caracas to Tehran via Damascus. This flight, which has no discernible commercial purpose, is believed to be used to shuttle illicit material, money, and sensitive personnel between Iran, Syria, Lebanon, and Latin America. Fitting with this type of activity, Iran also runs so-called diplomatic training courses from its embassies in Latin America. For these courses, Iran selects cadres of Latin Americans to train in a variety of distinctly non-diplomatic activities. The courses are known to include a range of subjects, none of which apply to the practice of diplomacy, but rather focus on activities like intelligence gathering and crowd control techniques. Further proof of Iran's efforts to utilize Latin American soil to advance its own illicit goals can be seen in the establishment of two separate banks in Venezuela. The first, Venezuela Banco Internacional de Desarrollo, is wholly owned by the Tosea Saderat Iran Bank and has been used by the Iranian government for illicit purposes in the past. Tosea Saderat Bank has been classified by the United States Treasury Department's Office of Foreign Assets Control as a tool used by the Iranian government to launder money used to finance international terrorism and Iran's own illicit nuclear program. The second bank, Banco Binacional Irani Venezolano, is supposedly a development bank focused on trade, infrastructure, housing, and energy. Researchers, though, have been unable to find public records of any significant project of these types being funded by the bank, a fact that should raise eyebrows. The sum total of these efforts reveal Iran's desire to use Latin America as a tool to advance its own anti-American agenda, as well as provide the financing and strategic cooperation needed to advance its goals of spreading international terrorism and acquiring its own nuclear weapons capability. These efforts have cost the lives of numerous Latin American citizens and made clear that Iran's threat to international stability extends well beyond its own immediate backyard. For Iran 180, I'm Chris DeVito.